Welcome, everyone. This is the first workshop of the administration for the February 2024 bar exam. And I think that these Sunday workshops are the most instructive parts of all the classes that I do, because we really get to go through questions, and I'm going to put up the poll. Hopefully it'll work. If not, we can put it in the group chat. But we'll get to answer the questions as a class and talk through them. And you'll see I'm human. I don't get every single question right. And we'll just learn together, and we'll create our own cram guide. So without further ado, I'm going to go over some things that are really important, and then we'll start doing some practice questions. I think this is the most fun of any of the possible sessions, but we'll see. So if you look at the complete crash course in the classroom, there was 3 quizzes that are due on Tuesday: the contents quiz and the contracts quiz. I think those are very important to do and submit, and a lot of you all have done that already. Something else that I'll show everyone is in the July 2023 course. If you go to right here, the July 2023 MBE cram guide, this was what we created last year. Contract law hasn't changed in the past 6 months, fortunately for me and for everyone else. So this is what we're going to create today, something similar. Why don't I read it? It should be interesting. The doctrine of prevention. When authorities didn't convict the man, even though they had the info, they still had to pay the reward, right? So that's like, you put a contract out that said, if you give us any info that leads to this person's arrest, we'll give you a reward. Someone came up with the info, and then the cops decided not to arrest the man, even though they had the info. Under the doctrine of prevention, you still had to pay the guy who brought the info. Course of dealing evidence is admissible as an exception to parole evidence. If I don't stress that enough, we're not going to do contracts until review. Please take that away from week 1 of my class, that course of dealing is admissible as an exception to parole evidence. And the next one, condition to contract, is also an exception to parole evidence. If, Alejandro and I have an agreement that we'll go 50-50 on Super Bowl tickets, if the Dolphins make the Super Bowl, and then, the Dolphins don't make the Super Bowl, and he hits me up, he's like, hey, I need that $8,000. I'd be like, hey, the condition, our conversation could be brought into this written contract to show a condition. An assignee can only assign the rights of the assignor. The strongest way to rectify this and to learn this rule is assignees have the rights of the assignor. So if you are assigned a contract, you step into the shoes of the assignor. You don't have more or less rights than you were assigned. And if you're going to assign again, you can only assign what you were assigned. When 2 parties have a contract, A and B assigns duties rights to C, then A becomes an intended beneficiary of the contract between B and C. This is a tough question that I can recall. I think it's about a bank, and basically the bank is an assignee, and just know that's the general rule. If you're an assignee in a contract, you more or less are an intended beneficiary of the contract. Leaving out a term to be filled in later does not make a contract invalid under the UCC. It's kind of black letter law right there. When a confirmatory memo has the necessary terms, those terms will govern the contract so long as the confirmatory memo is not disputed within 10 days, right? We know about the confirmatory memo rule, an exception to the statute of frauds between merchants. And it's just like an additional term. The offeror can reject to it expressly, but if they don't, we'll assume a contract has been formed. A rejection revests title of goods to the seller. If you reject the painting and then sell it, you are liable for the market price, not the contract price, and an act for conversion. Tough one. I remember this one about the painting, and it's just saying that conversion is you destroyed something at the time, so what it was worth at the time, not what you contracted for. If there's a condition as implicitly waived, it cannot be raised as offense. If you condition not to drink but acknowledge and are cool with them drinking, you waive it. I think we discussed that in one of these last classes. It's the scenario where you had to stay sober, but then you cheers and said, take a drink, Johnny, and now later you said, oh, Johnny, you drank, you breached the contract. Well, you implicitly waive that condition by cheersing to him. Under the UCC, an acceptance with a material term, the contract is valid, but the additional term is knocked out. Limitation on liabilities and material term. So if, Alejandro and I have an agreement that we're going to go to the Dolphins game together, but I'm not liable for any damages I cause in the stadium while, doing things, that wouldn't be a valid clause of the contract. That's a pretty bad example. Let's say Alejandro and I have an agreement I'm going to sell him apples. But when I sell him apples, I say, hey, I'm not liable for any damages as a result of these apples. Maybe they're all filled with like worms that are poisonous. And I'm like, I'm exculpated from liability. That's a material term that would be knocked out. On the exam, arbitration straddles the line. The best answer, if they add an additional term that includes mandatory arbitration, is the court will decide if this is a material or immaterial term. It's pretty much on the line. But an exculpatory clause that, limits liability or says that there's no damages, that would be a material term that would get knocked out, and they would provide UCC gap fillers. If there's a contract to deliver goods to a location and neither party shows up, the obligations of both parties are discharged on the contract, right? I mean, it sounds simple, but that's actually a tough question that it comes from. Pre-existing duty rule does not apply if the duty is owed to a third person. Okay, that one is about someone who is a private investigator and they have a job, and their job is to find people. But then one of the clients hits the private investigator up and is like, yo, if you find this person, I'll give you a big check. And then the private investigator finds him. And then the third person is trying to say, oh, well, you already had a pre-existing duty to find someone, that was your job. Well, this finite rule here says that if the duty is owed to another person, then the third person cannot apply that rule. So tough question, but I think it's helpful. And you see what I'm able to do. Fact pattern recognition. Same clown, different wig. That's what we call it, Ibis Prep. I remember that clown and his wig. He wasn't a clown. He was a private investigator. I actually have a lot of respect for private investigators. But in my mind, all people in adaptable are clowns. Okay. Under UCC, an oral modification is valid if done in good faith, right? That's a merchant law that modifications are valid under the UCC as long as they're done in good faith. There's no need for consideration. That's a common law rule where we need additional consideration for modification. Contract questions can be very tough. Construction contract. Oh, here's a tough one too. If there's a bid and there's reliance, then there's an option contract and the bid cannot be revoked for a reasonable time. So that's kind of a tough question too, but it's just a good way of understanding subcontractor bid law, where a bid that there's reliance upon generally operates as an options contract that they are free to accept, and it can't be revoked for a reasonable time. That helps you understand what a bid is. General contractor is going to build something and he wants to see who can do the plumbing. So he solicits bids. 3 plumbers submit their bid for what it will cost to do the project, and then he relies on the lowest bidder to make his bid to be the one who's going to do the whole project. And then the lowest plumber is like, oh no, I can't do it. Well, hey man, I reasonably relied on that cost when I submitted my bid to the big dog. And that's why there has to be some sort of binding period, let's say irrevocable period, and it kind of operates as an option contract. A repudiation can be retracted, but if the other person has not reasonably acted upon the repudiation to mitigate elsewhere. Repudiation can be retracted, but if the other person has not reasonably relied upon that, a repudiation can be retracted, but if the other person has not reasonably acted upon that repudiation to mitigate elsewhere, right? But only if. So if I say, hey, I'm not going to tutor you, and I texted y'all at 10:30 instead of doing what I actually did, let's let the record be clear, which was great, your submissions. But what if I said at 10:30, hey, y'all, going to the Dolphins game today, I'm repudiating this class? That's not good. But then what if at 10:45 I said, psych, Dolphins, you got this in the bag, I'm going to just teach from class. I'm just going to teach my class. That's okay. But what if some of y'all were like, oh, Andrew's not teaching his class? Well, then I'm going to go sign up for, insert my worst enemy here and go to their class. Well, then that's not cool, right? It would be too late for me to retract my repudiation. But for the record, I always show up, so don't worry. All right, so do you see what we did there? It took us a long time as a class to come up with that because it was the first day, but you could see the other ones were more comprehensive. And this 16-page cram guide, especially this for Civ Pro, how beautiful. We must have had Matt in the room that day. I don't know why I just got less break. Evidence, crim law, and we did a final review. I mean, this is golden right here. This is absolutely golden. If you read this up and down, you'll do very well on the MBE, I believe, because it's what we're going to do as a class this time from the bottom up. You can see I already started our own sheet, and it looks like this. So does anyone have any questions about those review points so far? All right, cool. Let's do a little bit of the content review just to kind of like, show you why this is cool. These questions we came up with are two quizzes that we thought were similar to the MBE questions. And then the concepts questions were created by Matt Beckerman, Jimmy Neutron, who he's just trying to help reinforce fundamental points. Like I said at the beginning of class, if any of them you feel are ambiguous or need clarification, just text your representative and we'll have Matt get to the bottom of it. Please don't text me with a pitchfork. Okay, so let's just look at a few of them. And if you've already done these, it'll be cool to reinforce. Reinforcement is the key to this. We're just going to do a few, and then we'll do some other programs and just get a good mix. Alex wants to sell his car to Bob, but they cannot agree on a price. Bob offers $10,000, which Alex rejects. Alex responds offhand that he might consider taking $15,000 for it. Bob then sends Alex a message saying, "I accept your offer, $15,000. Is a contract formed? Yes, because Alex made a clear offer and Alex accepted it. No, because Alex did not accept Bob's original offer. No, because Alex never made an offer that was capable of being accepted. No, even though Alex made a proper offer, because Bob didn't properly accept it." And just so everyone gives me 1 second, I want to try something. I've never done this on the iPad. We'll see if it works. Polls. Let's launch a poll. Just want to see if this will work. Can everyone still vote on the poll and see the thing at the same time?
Yes.
All right, sweet. So why doesn't everyone take a moment? And this will just be a warm-up. We'll just do some concepts questions, and then we'll do some real questions.
Wait, Andrew, is A supposed to say that Alex accepted his own offer?
Yeah, A seems like a definite wrong answer. Okay, does everyone have a yes? Oh, literally 100% of class said C. Can everyone see the results? No, I have to show like this. Okay, so the entire class understood there was no offer there, right? Because he said, I would consider doing it. Was everyone able to see the results right there? Cool. Now what I'll do is stop sharing and we'll do another poll and we'll just do a couple of these and then we'll do some actual MBE questions and y'all are gonna have the time of your lives. All right, so we all think it's C because he said he might consider taking it, right? That's not definitive enough to constitute an offer. Paul offers Quentin $50 to mow his lawn. Quentin says nothing, but mows Paul's lawn the next day. Has a contract been formed? Yes, because Paul made an offer and Quentin accepted it. No, because there's no consideration. No, because the agreement was not in writing. Or no, because Quentin never told Paul that he accepted the offer. Let's see. Amazing. These are easy questions, but not all of them. They do get harder, especially down the line because they're made by Matt and no one got perfect results on them, but reinforcing, right? Let's see why we all agreed that A was the correct answer. Because Paul made an offer and Quinn accepted it, there was a unilateral contract where Quinn accepted not through words, but rather through conduct, beginning performance. This is also not a contract that needs to be in writing, as it doesn't fall within the statute of frauds, and there was valid consideration, the offer to pay $50. Okay. So let's do another poll. We'll do like two or three more of these. Giving everyone confidence. Alpha agrees to sell a car to Beta for $10,000. Alpha changes his mind and sells the car to Gamma instead. Can Beta sue Alpha for breach of contract? Yes, because Alpha breached the contract with Beta. No, because Alpha had the right to sell the car to whomever he wanted. No, because Beta did not pay Alpha any money yet. Or no, but only if Beta can prove they suffered damages as a result of Alpha's breach. Okay, pretty solid. The whole class is pretty much in alignment here with A, because he changed his mind and sold it to Gamma instead. Now, if you thought D, but only if he could prove damages, that wasn't the question. It was, can they sue for breach of contract? The answer is yes. Can they recover damages is another question, but they could certainly sue because of a breach of contract. He sold it to Gamma and they'd agreed to sell it to Beta. All right, we'll do two more and then we'll move into some official questions. So far, so good. They do get a lot harder, so, make sure you do the contents questions on your own. Foxtrot hires Golf to renovate his kitchen for $10,000. After completing the work, Golf demands an additional $5,000, claiming that the project was more difficult than he anticipated. Can Foxtrot refuse to pay the additional amount? Yes, because Golf's request for additional payment was not part of the original contract. No, because Foxtrot received the benefit of Golf's work and should pay him for it. No, because Golf has the right to demand additional payment for unforeseen difficulties. Yes, but only if Foxtrot can prove that the additional work was not necessary or agreed upon. Awesome.
Go back to the question, please.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
All right, we're all saying yes, he can refuse to pay it, because this is after and claiming more difficult than anticipated is not something that we do in contract law. The contract was completed. He cannot unilaterally change the terms of the contract without Foxtrot's agreement. If he had agreed to it and it was a valid modification, that would be a different question. All right, we will do one more and then we'll start doing some questions. This is like a good warm-up, but I do want everyone on their own to make sure that they finish these questions and submit it. Let's do one more. Can everyone see this poll? It's up. Okay. Hotel India advertised a room for rent for $100 per night. Juliet calls and makes a reservation for the room, but when she arrives, Hotel India tells her that the room is no longer available. Can Juliet sue Hotel India for, and again, it's not for damages, it's for breach of contract? Yes, because Hotel India breached the contract by failing to provide the room. No, because Juliet did not pay any money yet. No, because Hotel India has the right to refuse service to anyone. Yes, but only if Juliet can prove that she suffered damages as a result of Hotel India's breach?
I don't see the poll for this anymore.
Maybe I didn't launch it.
There we go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem.
All right. Everyone seems to understand that this is a breach of contract. They're saying, but you're not paying any money yet. Some people said that, but that doesn't matter because they made the reservation. The agreement was made. The promise to pay the money was consideration. You don't have to actually pay the money for there to be a valid contract. So they breached the contract by failing to provide the room. When Juliet made a room reservation, Hotel India had duty to provide the room to agreed upon price, and its subsequent failure to do so constituted a breach of that duty. All right, one more without the poll. We'll just talk about as a class. John sends a letter to Jane asking her to clean his house for $200. Jane mails an acceptance letter to John, but then John calls Jane to cancel his offer, unaware that she mailed the letter. Can John argue that there's no valid contract? Yes, because John never knew about the acceptance, so there's no meeting of the minds. No, because Jane received the offer and wrote an acceptance letter. No, because Jane put the acceptance letter in the mail. Or yes, even if John knew about the acceptance letter because he never received it. Does anyone out there have any ideas about this one?
Well, it looks like this is a mailbox rule type of question.
Sure. All right, Gabby, you've answered a lot. Let's try someone else. Does anyone else thinking that this is the mailbox rule can take us to the correct answer? And that was a good start, Gabby.
I was gonna say I agree. I think it's pointing towards the mailbox rule.
And where would no continue? And where would that take us to in this question?
C and under the mailbox rule, acceptance is effective upon dispatch. So even though he was unaware of her acceptance, she had already mailed it before he decided to cancel the offer.
Excellent, good work. Because Jane put the acceptance in the mail under the mailbox rule, an offer is accepted the moment a letter accepting the offer is placed in the mail, even if the offeror tries to rescind the offer before he receives or even aware of the acceptance. These questions will reinforce fundamental areas of law like the mailbox rule. But what I want to do is move on to a commercial Q bank that has disclosed MBE questions so we can really get the feel for them. You do have them here as well, you know? These questions that we have, contracts quiz number 1 and contracts quiz number 2, are questions that we wrote on our own that are very similar. You know what? Let's try one of them just to give everyone an idea of what to expect on these 2 quizzes. So we'll just try this one. We'll talk it out, and then we'll do the polls for the commercial quizzes. So a homeowner decided to sell their house and concealed a significant water damage in the living room ceiling, resulting from an unrepaired leaking roof. On the day the house was listed for sale, the homeowner personally showed a prospective buyer around the property without mentioning the water damage or roof issues. The buyer promptly agreed in writing to purchase the home for $250,000 without discovering the concealed problems or seeking legal advice. Before the closing date, the buyer uncovered the water damage in the leaking roof with estimated repair costs of $28,000. Subsequently, the buyer refused to proceed with the purchase. If the homeowner takes legal action against the buyer for breach of contract, is it likely that the homeowner will win? No, because the contract was formed since the buyer did not have a real opportunity to comprehend the essential terms of the contract. No, because no contract was formed since the buyer did not have a real opportunity to comprehend the essential terms of the contract. No, because the homeowner concealed evidence of the water damage and leaking roof. Yes, because the homeowner made no affirmative statements of fact about the water damage or leaking roof. Or yes, because the buyer acted reasonably by failing to employ an inspector to conduct an independent inspection of the home. Does anyone have any thoughts about what the answer to this one might be?
I would go with B.
I would agree with B, right? And I mean, they made this one pretty clear. It was concealed significant water damage. He failed to mention the water damage or roof issues. Then they suffered damage. On the bar in contract law, remember, it's going to be governed by the concept of good faith. So here, there was no good faith. I do believe that concealment is the issue. And then we have nice explanations. A misrepresentation of fact that induces agreement allows for the avoidance of a contract. Misrepresentation involves providing information that does not align with the actual facts. Deliberate actions aimed at preventing someone from learning the fact are considered equivalent to asserting that the fact does not exist, constituting misrepresentation. The homeowner's concealment of water damage by painting over it was an affirmative action intended to hide the issue, leading the buyer to enter the contract based on the misrepresentation. So I want everyone to make sure that for this week, if you can only do the minimum amount of work, it's the concepts questions, the contracts quizzes 1 and 2. That's 96 questions. Some students in the class have already finished all 3. On top of that, I've asked everyone in here to purchase a commercial Q bank, and we'll work from 2 of them today so you can kind of see if you have any preferences. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think, not that's pretty much it. Do the questionnaires, do the study my cram guides, read, big book outlines, do the whole thing you can, and then read our outlines and read all the materials, the PowerPoints. I really like my PowerPoint. Go through everything, but try to master contract law by tomorrow at 7, because we're going to start towards then. And then over the Christmas break, you'll have time to review contracts, torts, and a little bit of con law, and maybe look forward to those subjects. But remember, bar prep moves very fast. That's the hardest thing. Contracts will be in the rear view before you know it, and you can't lose sight of it. So let's really dig deep and try to master some material today. All right. Let's check out Adaptabar. If anyone's familiar with Adaptabar, it's a program that has a lot of disclosed MBE questions. And we can go to questions. Yeah, let's do 10. And let me pull up the polling feature. And we can have fun. Something in the chat. Oh my God, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting people to text me privately. I'm like the worst at that. Not as bad as the professor at UM a few years ago, but I could be better. All right, so polls and quizzes. Let's do this poll. No, not that poll. That's a terrible poll. Let's do this poll. Okay, excellent. So I'll read the first one, and then we'll play some popcorn and let other people read, because reading is fun. But I'll read the first one. A notorious spendthrift, who is usually broke for that reason, received the following letter from his uncle, a wealthy and prudent man. I understand you're in financial difficulties again. I promise to give you $5,000 on your birthday next month, but you better use it wisely or you'll never get another dime from me. The spendthrift thereupon signed a contract with a car dealer to purchase a $40,000 automobile and make a $5,000 down payment on the day after his birthday. If the spendthrift sues his uncle for $5,000 after the latter learned of the car purchase contract and then repudiated his promise, which of the following is the uncle's best defense? And I think if I press yes, see, smart me. If the spendthrift sues his uncle for $5,000 after the latter learned of the car purchase contract and then repudiated his promise, which of the following is the uncle's best defense? Everyone's going to ask, why didn't I read the call to question first? I probably should have, to be honest. It's question by question preference thing, but I do recommend overall generally to read the call to question first. So I'm sorry. A promise to make a gift in the future is not enforceable. Reliance by the promisee on a promise to make a future gift does not make the promise enforceable unless the value of the promised gift is substantially equivalent to the promisee's loss by reliance. Reliance by the promisee on a promise to make a future gift does not make the promise enforceable unless that reliance also results in economic benefit to the promisor. Reliance by the promisee on a promise to make a future gift does not make the promise enforceable unless injustice can be avoided only by such enforcement. Everyone, take a minute, to think about this question and submit your results. All right. We have 10 out of 17 people. Anyone need some more time? Take about 20 more seconds. All right. Really tough question to start. I'm familiar with this question, unfortunately. So I'm kind of going to refrain from the conversation. But let's talk about it. All right. Perfect. So these are the results. It seems pretty split between A and D, right? If we jump back to the question, can everyone see the results still? It doesn't matter. It's split between A and D. Does anyone want to argue for A over D? Does anyone want to argue for D over A?
I personally at first was between A and D, but I think D gives more like a complete answer with the exception because A sounds good because generally a promise to make a gift in the future is not enforceable, but I think there is a valid exception if you're trying to prevent unjust enrichment because you don't want the party to be unjustly enriched.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you said. A is a good answer, but D's a better answer. And this is why, people get mad at the questions we write. These are the questions that are actually submitted. They're close. A promise to make a gift in the future is not enforceable unless injustice can be avoided only by such enforcement. I do think that's a better defense. Does anyone feel strongly that A is better than D? The uncle should have foreseen that his promise would induce action on the spendthrift's part, which the promise did. However, the nature of the spendthrift's reliance, buying a car that he cannot afford, is inconsistent with the intended purpose of the uncle's gift, which suggests that justice does not require enforcement of the promise. A is incorrect. Some gift promises are enforceable under reliance theory. So the consideration doctrine is designed to enforce promises that are bargained for. There are some promises which, although the promisor makes them without bargaining for anything in return, nonetheless induces the promisee to rely upon them to his legal detriment. The situation is known as promissory estoppel. So we're going to take note of this, which arises when a promise is made that the promisor should reasonably expect to induce action or forbearance on the part of the promisee. When the promisee then relies on such a promise, a court may bind the promisor to the promise he made if injustice can only be avoided by the enforcement of the promise. The promissory estoppel doctrine requires actual reliance on the promise, and the reliance must have been foreseeable. A is incorrect. There are some promises which, although the promisor makes them without bargaining for anything in return, nonetheless induce the promisee to rely to his legal detriment. Some gift promises are enforceable under reliance theory. So let's put that on the first note of the year. Not an easy question. And don't anyone feel any type of way for getting it right or wrong. That question is super hard. And a lot of the questions, I swear, the only reason I'll get them right is because I've seen them before. And that's kind of what I want everyone to get to, that point where it's familiar. It's okay to be familiar. You're not cheating. You're working hard. So there are some promises that lack consideration, say gifts, but are still enforceable under a theory of reliance. This is known as promissory estoppel. So just to kind of clarify what the correct answer was, unless injustice can be avoided by such enforcement, right? a promise to make a gift in the future is not enforceable unless injustice injustice can be avoided only by such enforcement. Justice can be avoided only by such enforcement. I know this is a long, tedious process, right? But this is the process that works successfully. You want to take time and document things. Okay, we got it right. Does that mean I'm not going to document? Absolutely not. You learn a lot from questions you get right. You reinforce them. Questions you get wrong, you also need to document so you don't get it wrong again. So we're going to go through this slowly but surely. Good work, team. All right, Gabby, since you're on the screen, do you mind reading this question?
Sure.
Oh, you know what? Let me put the poll up while I do that before you read. Sorry.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you. Let's try poll number 7. All right, let's do it.
All right. So the call to question asks, at what points were the kayaks identified to the contract? So a recreational outfitter placed an online order with a seller for 20 new kayaks. The outfitter agreed to delivery by carrier under a destination contract, paid for the order, and received an email confirmation from the seller. The seller placed shipping labels on 20 individual kayaks in the seller's warehouse. The shipping labels listed the outfitter's name and address, the order number, and the proposed delivery date. The seller informed the carrier that the kayaks were ready to be picked up from the seller's warehouse for delivery to the outfitter. The carrier picked up the kayaks and delivered them to the outfitter. So, yeah. So now we have to figure out at what point were the kayaks identified from this story.
Can you read the answer choices?
Oh, the answer choices are when the outfitter and the seller entered into the contract, when the seller placed the shipping labels on the kayaks, when the carrier picked up the kayaks, or when the carrier delivered the kayaks to the outfitter.
All right, everyone take a little bit to think it out and submit an answer. All right, we got a pretty big split here. Anyone want to guess? Any guesstimates? All right, I did hear someone mumble they think it's B. Who was that?
That was me.
All right, I agree with you. Tell us why.
Yeah, I guess when facts were getting read to us, I kind of tried to put myself in the position of like a UPS, like a third party. Like when I'm looking at the contract, I don't know specifically which kayaks to pick up until the seller identifies it by placing a label. Like I don't get an update as a customer until the shipping label gets created.
Exactly. There's a bunch of purses in the warehouse. When do you know which purse is getting sent to you? When they smack the label on it. You know, it's definitely that. Look for identification as to when they place the label on the kayak. This is just asking identified to the contract. This isn't asking when does the risk of loss transfer. Maybe that's what a lot of people were thinking about when they picked C, common carrier, because they were like, oh, this is a shipment contract, so the risk of loss transfers when it's delivered to the common carrier. Not what the question was asking. The question was asking at what point were the kayaks identified to the contracts. So I'm going to agree with you when the shipping label was placed. Goods are identified to the contract when the seller ships, marks, or otherwise designates them as goods to which the contract refers. So let's go to our thing. And sorry for everyone for whatever I'm doing. Let's say under the UCC, goods are identified under the contract when the seller places a label on them. For example, when the seller places the label on the kayaks, the goods have been identified. Easy peasy. Are people having fun or opposite of fun? We like the polls though. I think I've learned that people like the polls. This is, last administration was the first time I did the polls. And people like the polls.
Honestly, I feel like I'm on the game show. Like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? That's what it feels like. Like when you phone a friend and you're trying to read the question to them.
There you go. Who wants to be a millionaire? Not me. I want to be a billionaire. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Can I have another reader volunteer, please? How about Taylor?
Okay. A debtor owed a lender $1,500. The statute of limitations barred recovery on the claim. The debtor wrote to the lender stating, I promise to pay you $500 if you will extinguish the debt. The lender agreed. Is the debtor's promise to pay the lender $500 enforceable? I should have read the following question first.
It's fine. Sometimes when they're super short, I do the same thing. So don't worry about it. And can you read the answer choices?
Yes. A, no, because the debtor made no promise not to plead the statute of limitations as a defense. B, no, because there was no consideration for the debtor's promise. C, yes, because the debtor's promise provided a benefit to the lender. And D, yes, because the debtor's promise to pay part of the barred antecedent debt needs no consideration to be enforceable.
Can everyone see the poll? Everyone can vote? Or no? All right. Anyone else still want to vote that hasn't been able to vote yet? Some people abstaining. Sorry. So we have a pretty decent split, but seems the majority picked D. Anyone want to explain D?
I guess I'll explain. Oh, that's
Sorry,
fine.
go ahead.
Okay. I think for me, like D sounds like that the fact the debtor's promise to pay the part of any barred antecedent debt doesn't need consideration, because I think paying for something barred is considered consideration, like past consideration.
I agree. I agree with D, and I agree exactly what you said, that it needs no consideration because it's any part of a barred antecedent debt. I mean, it's just let's see if we're right, but I agree with D. And basically, you gotta chill. We have a contract, remember? You're supposed to be quiet. Excellent. Tough question. Very tough question. D is correct. The enforcement of a debtor's promise is a long-established exception to the pre-existing duty rule. That's the takeaway. The enforcement of a debtor's promise is a long-established exception to the pre-existing duty rule. Oh, that's really the longest explanation ever. A promise is supported by consideration if two things are true. The promisee is giving up something of value or circumscribes his liberty in some way to suffer legal detriment. And the promisor makes his promise as part of a bargain for exchange for the promisee's legal detriment. The legal detriment aspect is mainly important where it is not clear that one party has really given anything up in the bargain. The bargain aspect is dispositive in situations that do not involve business dealings, such as a promise to make a gift. The pre-existing duty rule focuses on the bargain aspect of consideration. If a party does or promises to do what he is already legally obligated to do, or he forbears or promises to forbear from doing something that he is not legally entitled to do, he has not incurred the kind of legal detriment necessary to constitute consideration. A common application of pre-existing duty rule involves a creditor's agreement to accept payment by his debtor for a lesser sum in satisfaction of the full debt. Since the debtor owes the full amount, him paying a partial amount is not doing anything that he was not already legally obligated to do. Therefore, most courts hold that the creditor's promise not to require payment of the full amount is not binding for lack of consideration. However, modern courts have stripped down this modern rule in application. It applies only when the debtor makes partial payment of an amount that is indisputably due and due on the date that the partial payment is made. If, in addition to making a partial payment, the debtor gives security in addition to the part payment, refrains from bankruptcy or insolvency proceedings, arranges for a composition agreement, or pays part of a claim, the full amount of which is a bona fide dispute, the debtor is given consideration for the discharge of the larger amount. D is correct. And if that confused anyone, I didn't write that explanation. I was just reading it. D is correct. The debtor paid less than the total amount he owed to the lender, which appears to be a violation of the pre-existing duty rule. However, the enforcement of a debtor's promise is a long-established exception to the requirement that there be consideration to support the enforcement of promises. So the enforcement of a debtor's promise, right, is a long-established exception to the pre-existing duty rule. The enforcement of a debtor's promise is a long. Can't you just correct that for me? I thought it was 2024. Is a long established exception to the prior consideration rule. What they said? To pre-existing duty rule, I'm sorry. It's a better phrase for it. The pre-existing duty rule. And then we can say, for example, let's kind of just go back to the fact pattern real quick. A debtor owed a lender $1,500. It was barred by SOL, but he said he promised to pay $500 to extinguish the debt. For example, if a debtor owes a lender and the payment is barred by SOF, the lender agrees to pay a smaller amount. This agreement is enforceable and does not lack consideration. Again, sometimes it takes multiple times to go through these questions and truly understand right from wrong, but that's tough. I don't think anyone should be like, oh, I can't believe I got that wrong. I'm an idiot. Absolutely not. Super tough question. All right. Let me see who I can call on to. Let's do a new poll. Not this poll, though. That's a dumb poll. Let's do this poll. Okay. Poll 10 launched. And Ellie, do you mind being the reader for this question?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So the call of the question doesn't help, but which of the following statements is correct? A fixtures company in a signed writing contracted with an apartment complex for the sale to the apartment complex of 50 identical sets of specified bathroom fixtures, 25 sets to be delivered on March 1st, and the remaining 25 sets on April 1st. The agreement did not specify the place of delivery or the time or place of payment. Again, which of the following statements is correct? A, the fixtures company must tender 25 sets to the apartment complex at the apartment complex place of business on March 1st, but does not have to turn them over to the apartment complex until the complex pays the contract price for the 25 sets. B, the fixtures company has no duty to deliver 25 sets on March 1st at the fixtures company's place of business unless the apartment complex tenders the contract price for the 25 sets on that date. C, the fixtures company must deliver 25 sets on March 1st, and the apartment complex must pay the contract price for the 25 sets within a reasonable time after their delivery. Or D, the fixtures company must deliver 25 sets on March 1st, but the apartment complex's payment is due only upon the delivery of all 50 sets.
Everyone take your time with this question. Not an easy question at all. All right. We have decent participation. All right. I like the participation. That was pretty good. So, oof. A's, C's, and D's. Let's hear this one out. A's, C's, and D's. Who wants to argue for A? Anyone want to argue for A? No one picked B. No one wants to argue for B? Or A?
I don't know about arguing. I could just tell you that I think it's A, because it's, to me, it looks like an installment contract. And if they're delivering 25 in March, payment should reasonably be expected shortly thereafter. There's nothing there that says within X amount of days or anything like that. And then if they don't get payment, they don't really aren't obligated by the installment portion. I may be wrong or all confused.
Maybe. Okay. Anyone want to argue for B? Anyone want to argue for C? Anyone want to argue for D?
I don't know. My opinion on this situation is like, if they didn't specify the place in the installment contract, I mean, I think you don't necessarily have to send it to the place of business unless they already sent the first shipment there. And I think that's how you know you're supposed to send the rest to that same place.
So what answer did you pick?
I thought A described it, but I could be wrong.
Let's look at A. The fixtures company must tender 25 sets on March 1st. They have the duty to tender because why? They signed with an agreement to write to deliver 25 on March 1st and 25 on April 1st. It did not specify payment, right? So they have to deliver, you're saying, but they do not have to turn them over unless they pay the contract price for them, or they have no duty to deliver unless they tender the contract price for the 25 sets on that date. They must deliver them, but they do not have to turn them over. That seems weird to me. I don't know. I hate to do this, but I'm leaning towards B. I think that if it's silent in payment, then they have no duty to deliver unless they tender the price. Let's look at C. I know my answer is B off the how I feel about it. The fixtures company must deliver 25 sets on March 1st, and the apartment company must pay the contract price within a reasonable time after delivery. Is that how the UCC determines price? I don't think so. I think you have to pay to get what you want. Like, you're not going to get your couch delivered from Best Buy. That's ever going to happen. You're not going to get your TV delivered from Best Buy unless you pay the money, right? They don't have any duty. Go ahead.
If so for C, if both parties were merchants, would C be correct? The reasonable time after delivery portion of that?
Maybe if I have to look at the contract. Again, I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm not going to tell you which one could be correct until we see what's correct. I'm just telling everyone as a class, I'm leaning B because I don't think they have the duty. I don't think if you order equipment from a store and they're going to deliver to you, they have no duty to deliver that to you unless you pay them the money. That just sounds right. A sounds a little bit weird that they have to deliver it to you, but they hold it hostage in your front lawn until you pay for it. And C sounds a little bit, especially if they're not merchants, we're just going to trust me to pay for the TV after a week of watching it. And then D, they must deliver all 25 sets on March 1st, but payment is due upon delivery of all 50 sets. If it was performance, I think that's right. But on the UCC, I think it's B. If this was common law, I think D, and it was an installment contract, I think that's right. You don't have to pay until they finish performing. But because this is a UCC contract, I do think you have to pay. Have I convinced anyone to B, or am I about to get the red light of death in front of me?
No, I see what you're saying. It's weird with the hostage in A.
All right. B is correct. I just got so nervous. Because the fixtures company apartment complex contract is silent with respect to the place of delivery, the fixtures company only is obligated to make goods available at the fixtures company's place of business for the apartment complex to take delivery. If the apartment complex does not tender payment for the goods, the fixtures company has no duty to tender the goods. A is incorrect. The tender does not require the fixtures company to deliver the goods to the apartment complex place of business. C is incorrect. A contract does not specify a time of payment, so payment will be due when the apartment complex receives the fixtures. A reasonable time does not apply here. Payment must be made when the goods are tendered unless otherwise specified. D is incorrect. Since the contract is silent, that was the key thing. Like, most contracts are not silent with respect to terms of payment. But this one did say in the question, did not specify delivery time or place of payment. A reasonable time does not apply here. D is incorrect. Since the contract is silent with respect to time of payment, the apartment complex must make payment for delivered goods on March 1st when the fixtures company's tender delivery. Let's go into a little bit of an extendo. A contract may provide that a party does not have a duty to perform unless some condition is fulfilled. In such a case, the party's failure to perform will normally be justified if the condition was not fulfilled. Under the UCC, unless the contract specifies otherwise, a buyer's obligation to pay is conditioned upon the tender of goods by the seller. That's the takeaway from this question, right? Unless the contract specifies otherwise, a buyer's obligation to pay is conditioned upon the tender of the goods by the seller. Tender is effected when the seller makes conforming goods available for the buyer's disposition and gives the buyer notice sufficient to enable the buyer to take delivery. And then here's the otherwise. Unless the contract specifies otherwise, the place of delivery is the seller's place of business, and payment is due at the time and place for the buyers to receive the goods. So it's actually that part that gave us the answer. Unless the contract specifies otherwise, the place of delivery is the seller's place of business, and payment is due at the time and place the buyer is to receive the goods. So that part, because payment is due, they have no duty to deliver unless paid. Because the fixtures company apartment complex contract is silent with respect to the place of delivery, tender by the fixtures company does not require them to deliver the goods to the apartment complex place of business, but only to make the goods available at the fixtures company's place of business for the apartment complex to take delivery. Further, because the contract does not specify a time of payment, payment will be due at the time the buyer receives the goods. Thus, unless the apartment company pays the fixtures company for the fixtures company will have no duty to tender them to the apartment complex. I kind of read this and didn't state it out loud, but this is another thing that I kind of misspoke. They never delivered the goods here. They have to pick up the goods. This is obviously I've seen this question before. I've seen every single question here before. So don't think I'm a genius. I'm just a repeater of questions. But what this amounts to is I order a TV from Best Buy, right? No mention of delivery, no mention of time of payment, right? What is going to happen in that case? If you go online and order a TV from Best Buy, you are going to be required to pick that TV up from Best Buy and pay them the money before they give you the TV, right? That's the assumption. If the contract says Best Buy will deliver it, well, that's different. If the contract says, you can have the TV for 10 days and then pay us later, that's different. But if it is silent and you just buy a good from someone under the UCC, they have no duty to deliver the good to you, and they have no duty to give you the good unless you make payment. And where are you going to get the good? At their place of business. So if we can go back to this question, a fixtures company in a signed writing contracted with an apartment complex for the sale to the apartment complex of 50 identical sets of bathroom fixtures, 25 sets to be delivered on March 1st, and the remaining 25 sets on April 1st. The agreement did not specify the place of delivery or the time and place of payment. So B says the fixtures company has no duty to deliver 25 sets on March 1st at the fixtures company's place of business unless the apartment company tenders the contract price for the 25 sets on that date. And that's why they said the fixtures company's place of business. A is wrong because it says the apartment complex's place of business. But again, it's silent. Not only do they not have a duty to deliver them because it doesn't specify where delivery is, even though it says to be delivered, it kind of, maybe you could assume that. The one thing that we have to take from this question is they have no duty to deliver them or to turn them over until they receive payment. Tough question though, right? A lot of people picked A and a lot of people didn't pick B, but what's the takeaway here? A buyer's obligation to pay is conditioned upon the tender of goods by the seller. So let's take that away. Under the UCC, a buyer's duty to pay is conditioned upon tender by the seller. So too, a little Shakespeare for y'all. If a contract is silent as to place of delivery and time of payment, the seller has no duty to deliver the goods at his or her place of business unless the buyer makes payment. Super tough question. If everyone's like, oh, I hate that question, just know that every single person in the class just got that question wrong. So don't feel like that was a really whatever question you should have got right. Everyone else got it wrong. That should always help make people feel better. Why would I have gotten it right? I've probably done it 7 times by now. Okay, let's see if I can add a new poll. I think I can. I think I have all the power to launch polls now. All right, new polls up. And let's see. Does anyone mind reading who hasn't read yet?
I can read if you want me to.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. On March 1st, an apartment complex received a letter from a retailer offering to sell the apartment complex 1,200 window air conditioners suitable for the apartments in the complex's building. The retailer's offer stated that it would remain open until March 20th, but that the apartment complex's acceptance must be received on or before that date. On March 16th, the apartment complex posted a letter of acceptance. On March 17th, the retailer telegraphed the apartment complex to advise that it was revoking the offer. The telegram reached the apartment complex on March 17th, but the apartment complex's letter did not arrive at the retailer's address until March 21st. As of March 22nd, which of the following is the correct statement? A, the telegram revoking the offer was effective upon receipt. B, the offer was revocable at any time for lack of consideration. C, the mail was only authorized. The mail was the only authorized means of revocation. And D, under the terms of the retailer's offer, the apartment complex's attempted acceptance was ineffective.
Great. Everyone take a minute or two with this question. I've just done this question recently. Reading comprehension. Read this question very carefully before selecting an answer. Right. All right, let's see how we did. Oh shoot. All right, take your time, everyone. Let's take 20 more seconds. So pretty split here. Pretty split, but the majority did pick D, and I actually agree with D. Does anyone feel confident explaining to the class why D is the answer?
I can do it.
Let's do it. Fins up.
I picked D because although it looks like a mailbox rule type of question, the contract does have a specific terms indicating that the acceptance must be received on or before the 20th. And therefore, even though the acceptance was posted before the 20th, it wasn't received, so it wasn't effective.
Key takeaway from this is the offeror, let's call him, controls the terms of the acceptance. So yes, the mailbox rule is the default rule, but you can contract expressly whatever you want. And the express conditions here said that the acceptance must be received on or before that date, referring back to March 20th. So it must be received on or before March 20th. But he did not receive the letter until March 21st. Therefore, under the terms of the retailer's offer, which he was the master of, the apartment complex attempted acceptance was ineffective. D is correct because the retailer's firm offer stated that the apartment complex acceptance must be received on or before March 20th, and the apartment complex acceptance did not arrive until March 21st. It was ineffective in establishing a contract. Let's look at the extended explanation. An acceptance is the offeree's manifestation of assent to the terms of the offer, made in a manner invited or required by the offer. The offeror is the master of his offer, which means he may prescribe the method by which it may be accepted. The mailbox rule is followed by most courts and holds that acceptance is effective upon proper dispatch. This means that when a letter is deposited in the mail, the acceptance becomes effective and applies to acceptances dispatched by means other than letters, including telegrams and emails. An ordinary offer is revocable at the will of the offerer even if he has promised not to revoke it for a certain period. However, there are several exceptions to the general rule allowing revocation: the standard option contract, firm offers under the UCC, and the temporary irrevocability of the result of the offeree's partial or detrimental performance or detrimental reliance. Article 2 of the UCC allows for circumstances in which a promise to keep an offer open is enforceable, i.e. the offer becomes irrevocable, even if no payment has been made to keep it open, no consideration. If the offer is made by a merchant, the merchant's offer is assigned writing, and the writing gives explicit assurance that the offer will be held open. When offer meets these 3 criteria, it will be held irrevocable, even though there's not consideration given for keeping it open. So that was a nice rundown of the firm offer rule, even though it's not really how we answer this question. It's good background music. If the UCC firm offer rule states a time period for how long the offer remains open and irrevocable, that time period governs how long the offer remains irrevocable. If the firm offer did not state a period of time, it will be held irrevocable for a reasonable time. A firm offer cannot be made irrevocable for more than 3 months, even if contracted to remain open for longer. D is correct. This was a UCC firm offer because it was made by a merchant. The offer was in assigned writing, and the writing explicitly stated that the offer would remain open until March 20th. As such, the offer was irrevocable until March 20th. Additionally, the offer stated that the apartment complex's acceptance must be received on or before March 20th, which means the mailbox rule does not apply. When the retailer attempted to revoke, it was ineffective because of the irrevocability under this firm offer. When the apartments complex tried to accept it, it was ineffective under the terms of the offer because it was not received until March 21st. So a lot went down in that question, fact pattern, and explanation. We're just going to take something simple out of it. An offeror is the master of the offer and can expressly create conditions that, I don't want to use that word, that prevail over the mailbox rule. Does that make sense to everyone? An offer is a master of the offer. It can expressly create conditions that prevail over the mailbox rule, for example. Really, really great job so far. I think that everyone is doing amazing. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second so I can just read this chat and make sure no one sent me anything personal. Oh. Yeah. Shut up and pick it. I don't like that, but I'm not even getting into it. I mean, at some point you do have to pick an answer and move forward, but I think you should think about it before you just pick it. I think you think about it and then shut up and pick it. Thinking is the crucial piece. But
well,
okay.
Here it was because I had picked D and then I overthunk it or thought it or whatnot and went to A, which should have stayed with D. So it was like, I heard that when the correct answer was D. It's like, just shut up and pick and just move on, not dwell on it.
Yeah, for sure. But also don't dwell on choosing between 2 answers and getting it wrong and then doubting yourself back and forth. Because by nature, there's 4 answers, 2 of them are garbage, and then you're picking between 2. So like when people come to me and they're like, oh man, I knew it was between 2 and I picked the wrong one, like you got 0 points. You know, like that's not to be mean, but like that's kind of the sad, not that that's the truth about it. Like you have to be able to pick the correct answer to every question. So like if you were balancing in your head, you know, you need to get to a point where you can pick the right answer and close out the wrong answer instead of just strongly guess the right answer or strongly guess the wrong answer. But we're continuing, and this is a process of mastery. And Maria, if you don't mind, I'm going to have you read this very next question. Can everyone see? Is there a poll? Oh no, I gotta stop sharing that one. Oh, that was a tough question. So, you know, the majority seem to get it correct, but not everyone because they were thinking about the mailbox rule. But remember, the express conditions will prevail over the mailbox rule. The offeror is the master of the offer. All right, Maria, if you would be so kind to read.
Sure. If you hear somebody snoring, is my French bulldog, so I'm sorry.
Go ahead, you're fine.
You can't see it though, it's not on the screen.
You're fine.
No, your question is not on the screen.
Oh, French bulldog. I was like, yeah, don't worry, no. we love dogs on the screen. It's the humans that. Go ahead.
There we go. Can the debtor justifiably insist that the payment date for the rest of the installments in the is the 5th of each month? On January 5th, a creditor loaned $1,000 to a debtor under a contract calling the debtor to repay the loan at the rate of $100 per month, payable on the first day of each month. On February 1st, at the debtor's request, the creditor agreed to permit payment on February 5th. On March 1st, the debtor requested a similar time extension, and the creditor replied, "Don't bother me each month. Just change the date of payment to the 5th of the month. But you must now make the payments by cashier's checks." The debtor said okay and made payments on March 5th and April 5th by cashier's check. On April 6th, the creditor sold the loan contract to a bank, but did not tell the bank about the agreement permitting payments on the 5th of the month. On April 6th, the bank wrote the debt to the debtor, "Your debt to the creditor has been assigned to us. We hereby inform you that all payments must be made on the 1st of the month." Can the creditor justifiably insist that the payment date for the rest of the installments is the 5th of each month? A, no, because a contract modification is not binding on an assignee who had no knowledge of the modification. No, because although the creditor waived the condition of payment on the 1st of the month, the bank reinstated it. Yes, because although the creditor waived the condition of payment on the 1st of the month, the creditor could not assign to the bank his rights to reinstate that condition. D, yes, because the creditor could assign to the bank only those rights the creditor had in the contract at the time of the assignment.
Detailed question, but I think we can get this one right. Take your time, everyone. All right, let's see. Pretty good. Yeah, I'm liking what we're putting down here. D, right? Because that's just a correct statement. That's a correct statement of law. Like, you can only assign the rights that you had at the time of assignment. Excellent. The parties modified the contract, which was supported by consideration. Going forward, the debtor benefited from the later due dates, and the creditor benefited from receiving cashier's checks. Because the bank was the assignee, it will be subject to any claims that were valid against the creditor. When one person enters into a valid contract with a second person, this contract does not contemplate performance to or by a third party. However, if one of the parties seeks to transfer his rights and or duties under the contract to a third party, this is called an assignment. Generally, all contractual rights must be assigned with several exceptions. An assignment establishes privity of contract between the obligor and the assignee, while extinguishing privity between the obligor and the assignor, the original contracting parties. The assignee then replaces the assignor as a real party in the interest, and he alone is entitled to performance under the contract. Once the obligor has knowledge of the assignment, he must render performance to or pay the assignee. The assignee will generally stand in the shoes of the assignor, which means the assignee will receive the rights subject to any defenses, set-offs, and counterclaims that the obligor could have asserted against the assignor. Generally, the modification of existing contract in a way that solely benefits one party requires new consideration, so that's not simply the performance of a pre-existing duty, but a bargain for modification to the original contract. A condition is an event that must occur before a party is required to perform under contract. A condition may be expressed, meaning parties agreed to it. A condition may be waived by the party whose performance was conditional by performing even if the condition has not been fulfilled. D is correct. When the creditor told the debtor on March 1st to date the checks with the 5th instead of the 1st going forward, the debtor agreed. They modified their contract regarding when the payment was due each month. The creditor also instructed the debtor to make future payments with cashier's checks. In this agreement to modify the contract, the creditor benefited from receiving cashier's checks going forward, and the debtor benefited from the later due date each month, which is sufficient consideration for the modification. Moreover, the creditor, assignor, assigned the debtor, obligor's debt to the bank, the assignee, and the assignee then stands in the shoes of the assigner. As such, any valid claims the obligor had against the assigner would also be enforceable against the assignee. The debtor can thus justifiably insist on a later payment date with the bank. Really, tough question, I would say. But like I said, we did well on it. So the concept there is the assignee stands in the shoes of the assignor. And another point was modifications are enforceable if both parties provide consideration. And here in this question, what was the contract about? It was about a payment, so it was a service, right? Sorry, so let's say common law. Modifications are enforceable before I provide consideration. Okay. Let's do a new poll. And Maria, don't worry, I have a pit bull Staffy, a bully, and she snores. I can hear her snoring from across the house.
Thanks.
So, yeah, I noticed Snorlax. Oh no, not gonna ask that question. Okay. Question 14. Let's launch this. Anyone who hasn't read a question yet, mind reading this one? Don't all jump up at once.
I can do it.
Perfect. Go ahead.
All right. In a telephone conversation, a jewelry maker offered to buy 100 ounces of gold from a precious metals company if delivery could be made within 10 days. The jewelry maker did not specify a price, but the market price for 100 ounces of gold at the time of the conversation was approximately $65,000. Without otherwise responding, the company delivered the gold 6 days later. In the meantime, the project for which the jewelry maker planned to use the gold was canceled. The jewelry maker therefore refused to accept delivery of the gold or to pay the $65,000 demanded by the company. Is there an enforceable contract between the jewelry maker and the company? A, no, because the parties did not agree on a price term. B, no, because the parties did not put their agreement in writing. C, yes, because the absence of a price term does not defeat the formation of a valid contract for the sale of goods where the parties otherwise intend to form a contract. And D, yes, because the company relied upon an implied promise to pay when it delivered the gold.
I just did this question like 2 days ago. The student was frustrated that they got it wrong. So it's a tough question. Do your best. All right, let's see what we think. Ooh, so much diversity. Take 20 more seconds. All right, we have a lot of diversity here. B is the strongest selection. Does anyone want to argue for B? I agree with B, actually. Why does this need to be in writing?
It's a
$500. I think the
$500.
tried to throw in a bunch of facts about, the price changing and everything in the market, but I think it's all $500.
What about C though? Why didn't the delivery constitute performance, which would be an exception to the statute of frauds? The reason was because it wasn't accepted. They refused to accept delivery. So just because it was delivered doesn't constitute performance because it wasn't accepted. Does that make sense to everyone? Oh. Right. The parties failed to comply with the writing requirements of the Uniform Commercial Code. The absence of a writing signed by a jewelry maker renders the parties' oral agreement unenforceable. And D, because the jewelry maker did not accept the gold, whether or not there was an implied promise is irrelevant. UCC provides that a contract for sale of goods for the price of $500 or more is not enforceable by way of action or defense unless there's some writing sufficient to indicate that a contract for sale has been made. However, there are some narrow exceptions to this general rule. Goods that have been specifically manufactured do not need a signed writing because the sale of specifically designed goods to another customer is not suitable. A writing is also not required with respect to goods that have already been paid for received. So that was an interesting point. I kind of overlooked that, but it just said ounces of gold. It wasn't specially manufactured goods. We remember the mnemonic SWAP, specially manufactured goods, written confirmatory memo, admission in court, partial performance, or promissory estoppel. Here, you would have thought it was partial performance, but D is incorrect. The answer suggests there's an alternate form of consideration that can make this contract enforceable even without signed writing. However, because the jewelry maker did not accept the gold, whether there's a implied promise is irrelevant. Going back up to this, B is correct. The parties failed to comply with the writing requirement. Under that section, a contract for sale of goods of $500 is not enforceable unless there's a writing indicating a contract of sale that is signed by the party against whom enforcement is sought. In this case, the absence of such writing signed by the jewelry maker renders the party's oral agreement unenforceable. So the takeaway is goods over $500 must be in writing, and partial performance is not satisfied if goods are delivered but not accepted. If accepted, performance would provide exception to the statute of frauds. Tough question, but does everyone understand what we were able to take away there? That this actually was goods over $500, and it was not performance because they delivered the goods, but they did not accept them. If they would have accepted them, then you could have argued that you could have successfully argued that it was performance. Does anyone mind reading this one who hasn't read yet? Well, I'll put up another poll. Any new faces or new voices? Cool. Awesome sauce. Can we all see this one? All right. I'll read this one for lack of participation. Will the mechanic be able to enforce the landscaper's promise to pay an additional $2,000? A mechanic agreed in writing to make repairs to a landscaper's truck for $12,000. The mechanic properly made the repairs. When the landscaper tendered payment, the mechanic refused to deliver the truck unless the landscaper promised to pay an additional $2,000. The customary charge for such work was $14,000. Because the landscaper needed the truck immediately to fulfill existing contractual obligations, and because no rental trucks of the same type were available, he promised to pay in writing to pay the mechanic an additional $2,000. The mechanic then delivered the truck. Will the mechanic be able to enforce the landscaper's promise to pay the additional $2,000? No, because the landscaper had no reasonable alternative but to yield to the mechanic's wrongful threat. No, because the mechanic exerted undue influence over the landscaper with respect to the modification. Yes, because the landscaper could have obtained possession of the truck through legal action rather than by agreeing to the increased payment. Yes, because the modified contract price did not exceed a reasonable price. Take your time. This is narrow. All right, take your time. Take another minute. I hate this question. I can't remember. Okay. Let's see what we got here. So most people picked undue influence. Some of y'all picked wrongful threat. Does anyone feel strongly for either one of those two?
Well, I remember undue influence, you have to have like a confidential relationship. So that's usually like a family or like teacher student, something like that in order to happen. But they're both very similar because wrongful threat is duress. So here it says that the mechanic basically refused to deliver the truck after properly making the repairs, which is what he promised to do, but he refused to deliver the truck unless the landscaper promised to pay an additional $2,000. And there wasn't any other option for the mechanic to like deny it. So he wasn't in the position to deny paying the additional $2,000 at the time. But I think it sounds more like a threat to me.
I think you're correct. I think you nailed it. I see it, like I was on the fence, but as you said it, you kind of reaffirmed what I was kind of trying to articulate in my own mind. Does anyone feel strongly why this is undue influence versus threat? Because I'm not saying that I'm right. I actually don't remember the answer to this one. But does anyone think it's a undue influence situation? I mean, the reason why it's undue influence is it seems like a position of power. You know, it kind of resonates with. It doesn't seem like a threat in the terms of like, give me your money. But I really like what you said about confidential relationship, like a secret relationship. I don't see that here. I'm tempted to pick A. Does anyone want to save me?
I like
Go ahead. Let's hear it.
I keyed in on the no rental trucks of the same type available. So it feels like there's no meaningful choice.
So you keyed in that there's no other trucks available. That's crucial.
Yeah.
Does that lead you to thinking it's a threat or that's an undue influence?
That it'd be at least construed as a threat.
Okay. Let's go. Really great job, Gabby. You crushed that because I've struggled for years to kind of differentiate between these two. But I think focusing on the confidential relationship is a good place to start with undue influence. Big on lack of capacity. See, it's typically based on the relationship between the parties and one party exerting pressure on the other rather than circumstances that leave no meaningful choice for one of the parties. Man, if anyone takes anything away from this class, I took the MBE in July. My favorite thing on earth, right? And they asked 2 questions on that test that made you distinguish between undue influence and duress. And I was a little bit perturbed about it because I was like, that's so nitpicky. But I think this is a great moment for us to really clarify that. Undue influence really focuses on the relationship between the parties, whereas unequal bargaining power over the other because of a lack of a meaningful choice, that will be known as a contracts of adhesion. Really good stuff we can learn here. So we'll put all this in our outline. Courts will not enforce contracts of adhesion in which one party will have unequal bargaining power over the other because of a lack of meaningful choice. Here, the landscaper had an immediate need for his truck and no other rental trucks of the same type were available. The landscaper had no choice but to pay the other, making the agreement to pay it unenforceable. B is incorrect. Undue influence of defense based on lack of capacity is typically based on the relationship between the parties and one party exerting undue influence on the other rather than the circumstances that leave no meaningful choice for one of the parties. This makes answer choice A the stronger answer, right? Again, that's what bothers me, the stronger answer, but they have to make this tough test. They have to make this test tough. If a contract is unconscionable at the time the contract was created, then the courts may refuse to enforce the contract or may enforce the contract without the unconscionable term. For a contract to be invalid, there must be both procedural unconscionability, gross inequality of bargaining power, and substantive unconscionability, terms unreasonably favorable to one party. A is incorrect. Although there is no substantive unconscionability because the customary charge for repairs is $14,000, there is procedural unconscionability. The landscaper had no alternative rental trucks available and needed the truck immediately to fulfill the existing contractual obligations, which means the landscaper lacked a meaningful choice. Courts will not enforce contracts of adhesion, which make the subsequent contract for additional $2,000 unenforceable. So before I lose that, let's just kind of focus on that. Courts will not enforce contracts of adhesion, which are essentially contracts created under, let's say, duress or threat, where there is no meaningful alternative or choice, which also is essentially procedural unconscionability. Right? I mean, look, that's getting real nitpicky. Like, these words kind of sound similar to me, but that's how they tease it out here. Courts will not enforce contracts of adhesion, good word to know, which are essentially contracts created under duress or threat, where there's no meaningful alternative or choice, which is essentially procedural unconscionability. I kind of tried to tease that out to the best of my abilities. See how it worked. All right, maybe we'll do just one or two more adaptive bar, and then we'll look at one on bar max, and we'll call it an afternoon. Trust me, I'm not going to go over too long, but maybe just a few minutes. All right. I want everyone to be able to go to church or watch football or whatever it is they need to do, and I'm going to start making my recordings for my new course. Let's do a new poll. Let's do this poll. Let's do this poll. No, sorry. My bad. Let's do this poll. Beautiful. Okay. Which of the following should the court rule? Under a written agreement, a pastry company promised to sell its entire output of baked buns at a specified unit price to a baked goods retailer for 1 year. The baked goods retailer promised not to sell any other supplier's baked buns. The parties' contract included a provision for termination by either party at any time upon reasonable notice. After 6 months of performance on both sides, the pastry company, claiming that its old bun baker had become uneconomical and that it could not afford a new one, dismantled the bun baker and began using the space for making dog biscuits. Ooh, nice. The pastry company's output of baked buns having ceased, the baked goods retailer sued for breach of contract. The baked goods retailer moves for summary judgment on liability, and the pastry company moves for summary judgment of dismissal. Which of the following should the court rule? Summary judgment for the baked goods retailer, because as a matter of law, the pastry company cannot discontinue production of baked buns merely because it was losing money on that product. Summary judgment for the pastry company, because its cessation of baked bun production and the baked goods retailer's awareness thereof amount as a matter of law to valid notice of termination as permitted by the contract. Both motions denied because there are triable issues of fact as to whether the pastry company gave reasonable notice of termination or whether its losses from continued production of baked buns were sufficiently substantial to justify cessation of production. Both motions denied because the pastry company may legally seek production of baked buns, but under the circumstances, it must share with the baked goods retailer its profits from the manufacture of dog biscuits until the end of its first year. Everyone take some time with this one. Okay, let's see. All right, 82%, 83% pick and C here. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to end it early. 83% pick C. Anyone want to argue for C?
Well, it says in the facts itself that under the agreement, they provided a provision for termination by either party at any time upon reasonable notice. So to me, that sounds significant because we don't know what is reasonable notice. And it looks like they performed for 6 months, but then suddenly the old bun baker had become uneconomical and the company couldn't afford a new one. So
Right.
I think like it could be debated, like, okay, if this suddenly happened and the machine's not working and it's necessary to produce the buns, I mean, that could be a valid argument for like the reasonable time would be like to like stop the contract is to basically just stop when the machine's not working anymore. But on the other hand, we don't really know the definition, so the term sounds pretty vague. So we might
Yeah,
need like parole evidence or something to help come in.
I agree with you that a process of elimination here. A says that as a matter of law, they can discontinue production. I don't like that. B says, as a matter of law, they were entitled to a notice of termination. I think that's too strict to be matter of law. We're going to determine one way or the other. And then D, to share with the profits from the dog biscuits, that just kind of sounds ridiculous. I hope she's the answer just based on what Gabby was saying in process of elimination. Yeah. Under the UCC, a quantity term in a contract as measured by the output of the seller means such actual output as may occur in good faith. The pastry company is permitted on their contract to reduce its output of buns, even to discontinue bun baking entirely, but only if the reason for doing so is made in good faith rather than to avoid its obligation of the contract. Therefore, there's a question of fact as to whether the pastry company decision to discontinue bun making was made in good faith. I mean, we don't even have to have a real takeaway from here. We mostly got this question right, and it really came down to that. It's a question for the court whether this was a good faith operation. All right, I just want to do maybe some of these questions on bar max. And this is shared with me by students, so don't pay attention to those red dots. Sorry. Let's do some of the bar max ones, just like maybe two of them, just so people can get a feel and decide, if you haven't got access to a corporate Q bank yet, maybe you'll be interested in this one. Okay. Let's do another poll. Let's do this one. Let's submit. Okay. So where are we at? 111 times over. Okay. Yikes, pretty long question. Okay. So what's the call the question? On Swatter's appeal from a jury verdict for Swatter and judgment thereon, awarding damages only for the $5,000 fee permitted by the orchestra, the judgment will probably be blank, affirmed or reversed. Swatter, a baseball star, contracted with the Municipal Symphony Orchestra. I just don't really love these questions. I just feel like they're too long and kind of out of place. Let's go back to the other ones. And not to discredit any company. I just want to focus on shorter questions. So let's just do 2 or 3 and then we'll call it a night, or however many we have left, maybe 1 or 2. Under the terms of a written contract, a builder agreed to construct for a homeowner a garage of $10,000. Nothing was said in the parties' negotiations or in the contract about progress payments during the course of the work. Okay, so nothing said about negotiations or progress payments, and it's going to be for $10,000. After completing 25% of the garage strictly according to the homeowner specifications, the builder assigned his rights under the contract to a bank as security for an $8,000 loan. The bank immediately notified the homeowner of the assignment. The builder thereafter, without legal excuse, abandoned the job before it was half complete. The builder subsequently defaulted on the loan from the bank. The builder has no assets. It will cost the homeowner at least $8,000 to get the garage finished by another builder. If the bank sues the homeowner for $8,000, which of the following will the court decide? The bank wins because the builder-homeowner contract was in existence and the builder was not in breach when the bank gave the homeowner notice of the assignment. The bank wins because the bank, as a secured creditor over the builder, is entitled to priority over the homeowner's unsecured claim against the builder. The homeowner wins because his right to recoupment on account of the builder's breach is available against the bank as the builder's assignee. The homeowner wins because his claim against the builder arose prior to the builder's default on his loan from the bank. Does anyone know what that word means, recoupment?
I think it's like to get the money back.
Yeah, does anyone else have a definition of recoupment?
It's just a fancy word for recover, right?
It means to recover from someone else. Like a claim for recoupment means if I have a claim and then you owe me money, like A owes B money, but B owes C money, then C could get that claim of recoupment from A. It's like getting money from another person. So that's what they're talking about here, that against the builder as the assignee, his right to recoupment. Let me see. I think actually you two are more correct than me. It just means the right to recovery of collection money that was previously unduly paid out. It doesn't have to be from a third party. It's just, like you said, a fancy word for recovery. Your right to recoup. So let's see. Take your time.
Andrew, can you scroll down a bit, please?
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Most people are picking C. This question's pretty tough, actually. I think it's C2, though. The homeowner wins because his right to recoupment on account of the breach is available as the bank as the builder's assignee. I like C. Does anyone disagree with C?
I might disagree on the fact that the assignment might be the assignment basically gives the bank the right to get payment for the contract, but not necessarily makes the bank liable for the breach. And that's why I don't necessarily agree with C.
In terms of contract, the builder agreed to construct for a homeowner garage of 10,000. Nothing was said in the negotiations or in the contract about progress payments. After completing 25%, the builder assigned his rights under the contract to a bank as a security for an $8,000 loan. So what rights did the builder assign? The builder signed to get paid, right? $10,000. And he owed the bank 8,000. The bank immediately knowed the homeowner of the assignment. So now, they're on privity. The builder thereafter, without legal excuse, abandoned the job before it was half complete. The builder subsequently defaulted on the loan from the bank. The builder has no assets. It will cost the homeowner at least $8,000 to get the garage finished by another builder. If the bank sues the homeowner for $8,000, which will the final court decide? Does the bank have a right to recoupment as the assignee? Seems logical to me. Which answer did you pick, Alejandro?
I picked D.
D as in dog?
Yep.
Because his claim against the builder arose prior to the filer's default loan from the bank. It's hard for me to pick B and D because they seem like secure transaction related thoughts, like priority. I don't really notice that we do that if that's an issue we even do in contract law under the UCC Article 2, because that builder homeowner contract was in existence. Again, yeah, A, B, and D all seem to be priority related, and C just seems to be about assignment. Did anyone else pick D? I can actually find that for myself. Yeah, 2 other people picked D. Could be D. I'm going to go with C for my gut, but I appreciate your input. And if you're right, you're right. All right, C. C is correct. After contract rights are assigned, an obligor may be able to recoup damages against any claims by the assignee if they arise under the original contract that was assigned. Thus, the homeowner may recoup, and remember, recoup just means recover, fancy word for recovery, any losses sustained from the builder's material breach, even after the assignment to the bank. D is incorrect. The homeowner's claim against the builder for being in material breach may be raised even post-assignment to the bank because it's related to the same contract that was assigned. And this is probably, I think this might be the last question we'll do, maybe one more if there is one. I don't know. I set up for 10, but I would pay attention to this. And I always say, try to finish strong because TPBs are super hard. And whatever I'm about to read right here is all about assignment and third-party beneficiaries. When one party enters into a valid contract with a second person, this contract does not contemplate performance to or by a third party. However, if one of the parties seeks to transfer his rights and or duties under the contracts to a third party, this is called an assignment. An assignment establishes privity of contract between the obligor and the assignee while extinguishing privity between the obligor and the assigner. We already read this. The assignee then replaces the assigner as a real party in the interest, and he alone is entitled to performance under the contract. Once the obligor has knowledge of the assignment, he must render performance to or pay the assignee. If the obligor renders performance to or pays the assignor, he does so at his own risk. Typically, one of the parties, usually the assignee, will notify the obligor of the assignment. The assignee will generally stand in the shoes of the assignor, which means the assignee will receive the right subject to defenses, set-offs, etc. If the obligor's claim against the assigner is somehow related to the same contract that was assigned to the assignee, the obligor may bring the claim regardless of whether it arose before or after the obligor's notice of the assignment. This is called recoupment, which may only be used to diminish the assignee's claim and may not yield affirmative recovery for the obligor. C is correct. When contract rights are assigned, the assignee stands in the shoes of the assignor, meaning he has the same rights the assigner had, and he may be subject to the same defenses. Specifically, if an obligor has a claim against the assigner based on the same contract that was assigned to the assignee, the obligor may recoup losses regardless of when the obligor received notice of the assignment. Here, the builder, the assigner, assigned his contractual rights to the bank, the assignee, which means the bank's right to repayment under the contract would have been subject to claims the homeowner had against the assigner that arose out of the contract. The fact that the builder abandons contractual duties under the contract without cause amounts to a material breach, and the homeowner obligor may recoup his losses against the assignee against any bank the claim may have against the homeowner. Very, very difficult. I'll try to narrow it down in a few words or less. And just to remember from this last one, we also want to say that undue influence focuses on the relationship between the parties. This one was about an assignee can validly seek recoupment against an obligor for claims arising from the same contract. That's just, I guess, the simplest way I could break that one down. Okay. All right, perfect. So that was, 10 question review. We did some of my contents questions. I wanted to do some of the bar max ones. Maybe I'll do them next week for torts. It's just the one I happened to bring up seems super long and we'd already run out of time. So don't take that as a discredit to anything. You can see we have the July 2023 cram guide that we made. We have the February 2024 cram guide that we're starting to make. I have my whole complete cram guide. You can cram this stuff into your mind, but nothing will replace actual practice questions. That's why I say to get a commercial Q bank and do 25 questions a day, and to make sure you submit all of our assignments. So I hope this was as fun for y'all as it was for me. I know I went a little bit into NFL Sunday. I'm sorry for that. But thank you all so much.